Rain falls in heavy sheets on a city in chaos. Neon lights flicker against the darkness, illuminating twisted metal and broken glass. Amid the devastation stands a lone figure in gleaming armor, Iron Man, but not as the world remembers him. His once red and gold suit now shines an eerie white blue, like the cold glow of a distant star. In his gauntleted hand, he clutches a familiar symbol, the fractured remains of Captain America's shield. Captain America Steve Rogers is on his knees a few paces away, breathing hard, bloodied and exhausted. The unbreakable shield that had always defended him lies shattered, pieces crumbling under Iron Man's boot. Steve looks up in disbelief, rainwater and blood dripping down his face. He has fought Tony Stark a dozen times before, but never like this. This Tony stands taller, more resolute, eyes burning with a merciless light. Iron Man raises a palm towards Steve, repulsor charging with deadly energy. The hum builds, echoing like thunder. "Tony, don't do this," Steve pleads, voice strained. But the Iron Man before him doesn't lower his hand. Instead, Tony Stark tilts his head, a faint smirk curling his lips. The man inside the armor seems almost bored by the plea. Lightning forks across the sky, illuminating the scene in stark relief. For a heartbeat, time itself feels frozen. The raindrops hang like crystals around the two former friends. Steve's eyes harden with defiance. If this is his end, he will meet it head-on. Tony's gauntlet glows brighter, a sphere of crackling light growing, ready to unleash. And then a blinding blast. White-hot energy surges out, filling the night with an explosive flash. The camera of our mind's eye pulls back from the carnage at the very last second. Did Tony Stark just destroy Captain America? The answer hangs in the air as the scene cuts away, leaving us with the image of a hero fallen and a once trusted friend turned executioner. This is not the world we knew. This is a realm turned upside down by the choices of one man. To understand how we arrived at this deadly confrontation, we must step back in time, to the moment when the axis of good and evil itself was shattered. This is the story of how one Avenger's light became darkness, and how that darkness was fought back to light once more. It began on the blighted island of Genosha, under a blood-red sky of war. Tony Stark, Iron Man, fought side by side with the Avengers and X-Men against an unimaginable threat. The Red Skull, twisted by the stolen brain of Charles Xavier, had transformed into a psychic monster bent on global genocide. In the shadow of massive telepath-controlled Sentinels robots Tony himself unknowingly helped create under duress, heroes and villains formed a desperate alliance. Iron Man's repulsors blazed, and Captain America's shield flew true, while even Cyclops and Scarlet Witch put aside old grudges to battle the greater evil. The air tasted of ash and ozone as power clashed with power on that hellish field. But brute force wasn't enough. The Red Skull's mind was too strong, his onslaught of hate warping the will of even the bravest. Scarlet Witch, eyes glowing with determination and dread, realized brute force would fail. With a trembling breath, Wanda Maximoff began to chant an incantation, a risky, untested spell to invert the axis of moral intent. Dr. Doom, of all people, joined her, adding his sorcerous might to hers in a final gambit. As Iron Man and the others held off the swirling psychic storm, Wanda's voice rose above the chaos. Latin syllables mixed with Sokovian fervor rolled off her tongue, weaving dark magic through the stormy sky. There was a blinding flash of red and white light. A shockwave of ethereal energy blasted out from Genosha, sweeping over friend and foe alike. Iron Man staggered as the spell took hold. In the instant before that wave of magic overtook him, Tony could hear the echo of the Red Skull's telepathic taunt still ringing in his mind. The villain had gleefully called him a false hero, a soulless sociopath hiding behind metal and money. Under normal circumstances, Tony would dismiss such poison. But under the spell's sway, that cruel whisper became a gospel truth. In that searing moment, something fundamental shifted inside Tony Stark. All his usual doubts and guilty conscience fell silent. In their place, a surge of cold clarity, liberating, exhilarating, terrifying, filled him. Tony's vision sharpened. The world around him seemed both perfectly clear and utterly trivial at once. The plan worked after a fashion. The Red Skull fell, his evil temporarily tamed by the very goodness locked within him. But the victory came at a dire cost. All around, heroes looked at each other with unfamiliar disdain, while former villains blinked in confused virtue. The spell meant to stop one monster had inverted the hearts of everyone present. For an instant, Captain America felt an unnatural flicker of cruelty and shook it off, his iron will fighting the effect. Cyclops, breathing hard after the fight, narrowed his eyes as a strange cynicism tugged at his mind. And Tony simply straightened to his full height, silent amidst the settling dust. Inside his chest, his heart beat steady and calm, too calm. He gazed upon the fallen Red Skull, not with relief, but with a faint sneer of superiority. Before anyone could understand what was wrong, Tony Stark vanished into the smoke and rubble. There was no cheer for victory, no attempt to aid the wounded. Iron Man just took off into the sky without a word to his teammates, leaving them and the liberated Genoshan prisoners behind. Hours later, as dawn broke, the remaining Avengers attempted a second ritual to put right what had gone wrong. A cleansing wave of magic swept over the weary combatants, washing away the spell's effects. Hearts that had been turned inside out found their moral compass again, but Tony Stark was nowhere to be found. High above the earth in the safety of his armor, Tony had raised psychic shields of his own design at the last crucial moment. The reversion spell passed over him without effect. While his friends slowly returned to themselves, the man called Iron Man stayed irrevocably changed. By the time anyone thought to check on Stark, he was long gone, leaving the victory celebration early and taking the darkness seeded in his soul with him. Unseen and unchecked, Tony flew off toward the horizon, carrying with him a bold and dangerous vision gleaming in his mind's eye. Tony Stark had been set free from the shackles of conscience, and deep down, some buried part of him rejoiced. The world's greatest futurist now saw a future that was his to shape by any means necessary. The Iron Man that the world knew was gone. In his place, something superior was born, and its story was only beginning. San Francisco wakes one morning to a miracle. Overnight, a gleaming white tower has risen on the waterfront Stark Tower West, its chrome and glass spire spearing into the sky. The city buzzes with rumors. Iron Man has moved here, bringing promises of cutting-edge technology and prosperity. Billboards flicker to life with Tony Stark's charismatic grin. And then comes Tony's first gift to the people, an app simply called Extremis 3. At first, it seems like a dream. The app appears on everyone's devices as if by magic, free to download. Its purpose? Self-improvement beyond imagination. A skeptical young barista is among the first to try it one crisp morning. With a single tap, a warm golden glow envelops her. In minutes, the scars on her face fade away. Her chronic limp straightens out. Across the city, hundreds of people witness similar transformations. Eyesight sharpened, skin cleared, illnesses cured as nanotech coursed through their veins. It's as if Oprah gave away superpowers. You get perfection, and you get perfection, and everyone feels like the best version of themselves. Imagine walking those streets that day, watching strangers laugh and cry with joy at their sudden good health and beauty. The city that once woke to fog and insecurity now wakes to a utopia of vanity and vigor. And high above, on the balcony of Stark Tower, Tony Stark looks down upon his experiment with a satisfied smile. To the public, he appears benevolent, almost godlike in generosity. He sends out a live broadcast, casually addressing the entire city. "You're welcome, San Francisco. Enjoy the upgrade, courtesy of Iron Man." The media goes into a frenzy. Tony's bold move makes headlines worldwide. Captain America, hearing the reports back in New York, furrows his brow in concern. Scarlet Witch senses that something about this gift is unnatural. But to ordinary citizens, nothing feels wrong at all. Not yet. They hail Iron Man as a savior, a visionary who's finally delivering the future he always promised. For a few days, paradise reigns. Crime plummets as potential aggressors bask in contentment and confidence. Hospitals find their beds emptying. Even Jean Grey, visiting the West Coast to meet some old friends, is stunned by the psychic ambiance. An entire city practically glowing with self-satisfaction and adoration for Tony Stark. On the surface, it looks like Tony has solved problems that plagued humanity for eons. Disease, infirmity, despair. Yet beneath that golden veneer, a shadow lurks. One morning, the barista who was healed wakes up in agony. Her old limp back, pain searing through her muscles worse than before. Across San Francisco, the perfection begins to expire. The Extremis effect lasts only so long before the body craves another dose of the miracle. Desperate for the high of health and beauty again, people check their app and find a new update, a payment requirement. The next dose of perfection will cost them, and not just in money. 100 a day is the price tag attached to their very humanity now, set by Tony's invisible hand. The outcry is immediate. Social media floods with confusion and anger. Is Iron Man truly charging people for the gift he gave? Protests gather outside Stark Tower West. But Tony Stark, reclining in his penthouse lab, merely chuckles at the outrage. He expected this. In fact, he desired it. Through the shimmering holographic screens, he watches the city writhe between gratitude and anger, addiction and resentment, and he feels nothing but cold amusement. When the mayor of San Francisco comes to negotiate, Tony doesn't even bother to meet him in person. A hologram of Stark, suave and unbothered, informs City Hall that this is simply the new way of things. Everything comes at a cost, he says breezily, his projected blue eyes utterly devoid of empathy. Consider it a subscription to Utopia. If you want to keep what I've given you, you'll pay. If not, you're free to return to your ordinary lives. This isn't the hero the world thought it knew. This is a man playing puppet master with an entire city's soul. On the streets below, tensions rise. Some citizens willingly pay, terrified of losing their perfection. Others protest, denouncing Stark as a tyrant in tech mogul's clothing. And still, Tony watches, arms folded like a god surveying his dominion. To him, it's all a grand experiment in control. He's solved the puzzle of human betterment, and if the insects squabble over his methods, so be it. In the reflection of his tower's glass, Tony sees himself radiant, unburdened by doubt or morality, and he smiles. San Francisco is only the beginning. The cost of power has been revealed, and Tony Stark is unflinching as the bill comes due. In the distance, storm clouds gather, both literal and figurative, as the world begins to see the true face of its new savior. When news of Stark's twisted Utopia reaches the East Coast, Captain America cannot stand idly by. Steve Rogers knows Tony better than anyone, or thought he did, and he refuses to believe his friend is beyond reason. With a heavy heart, Steve boards a Quinjet bound for San Francisco. Scarlet Witch accompanies him, her face drawn with worry. Wanda's fingers still tremble with guilt. She senses that Tony's fall is inextricably tied to the spell she wove. She intends to set things right, or at least try. They arrive to a scene that is equal parts marvel and nightmare. The Golden Gate Bridge shimmers with digital billboards praising Iron Man, even as angry crowds gather below. An impromptu protest encircles Stark Tower West citizens demanding fair treatment, some begging for continued help, others chanting for Tony's downfall. It's chaos born of too much hope turned sour. Steve pushes through the crowd, shield on his back, Wanda at his side. Many in the crowd recognize Captain America. A few cheer, more plead for help. With each step, Steve's resolve hardens. Whatever Tony has done here, it needs to stop. At the tower's entrance, sleek armed drones block the way, hovering like silent sentinels. Steve raises both hands calmly. "I'm here to talk," he announces. His voice, steady as a rock, carries over the murmurs. After a tense pause, the drones part and allow them inside. Tony is watching, of course, and he's curious enough to let his old ally approach. Inside the lobby, the atmosphere is sterile, futuristic. Floor-to-ceiling screens display a giant live feed of Tony Stark's face, magnified and serene. "Steve," Tony's voice coos through hidden speakers, warm yet condescending. "I've been expecting you, and Wanda too. Welcome to the future." An elevator opens on its own, beckoning them in. Exchanging a cautious glance, Steve and Wanda step inside as it ascends at breathtaking speed. They are deposited in a penthouse office that feels more like a throne room. Panoramic windows reveal the bay and the city beyond Tony's new kingdom. And there he is, the man of the hour, standing casually behind a sleek metal desk. Iron Man's armor is not the familiar red and gold now. It flows and shifts subtly, a living metal that clings to Tony's form like liquid mercury given life. The white and blue sheen makes him seem like a mythical knight, or perhaps an angel, albeit a fallen one with eyes that gleam too bright. "Steve," "Wanda," Tony greets them with a charismatic smile. He doesn't remove his armor or offer a handshake. It's as if a king were granting an audience. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Come to marvel at my brave new world?" Captain America steps forward, concern etched on his face. "Tony, we need to talk about what you're doing. This isn't right. You're extorting people, manipulating them. This isn't you." Wanda nods, standing slightly behind Steve. Her red coat sways as she subconsciously readies a bit of hex magic in her palms, just in case. Tony sighs, a hint of impatience crossing his face. "I'm exactly who I want to be, Steve. For the first time, I'm unfiltered. I fixed an entire city in a week. Disease, crime, poof." He snaps his fingers, the sonic crack making Wanda flinch. No one's starving or scared. Isn't that what we always wanted as heroes? A better world? Steve's jaw tightens. Not like this. You don't get to play God and decide who gets help only if they can pay for it. That's not justice, Tony. That's tyranny. At the word God, Tony's smile actually widens. His eyes drift to Wanda. "Funny you mention playing God, coming from you," he says softly. Wanda feels a chill as Tony continues. "Remind me, Wanda, who was it that decided to magically tamper with everyone's souls on Genosha? How is that not playing God?" She opens her mouth, shame and anger warring within her. "That was to stop the Red Skull. It was an accident." "Accident or not," Tony interjects sharply, "it happened. And here we are." He spreads his arms, the very picture of a magnanimous ruler. "I'm simply making the best of it. I have the power now to truly change the world, and I won't apologize for using it." Steve takes another step forward, placing himself firmly between Tony and Wanda, sensing the hostility rising. "Tony, listen to yourself. This isn't you talking." "Oh, spare me," Tony snaps, and for the first time the facade of calm cracks. "You're here to lecture me, as if I've lost my mind, but I see things more clearly than ever. You're clinging to old ideals, Steve. Morality versus control. Isn't that the eternal debate?" He begins to circle them leisurely. Steve rotates to keep Tony in front of him, shield arm tensed. Tony goes on, voice smooth and cutting. "You say what I do is wrong because it takes away choice. But what good is a choice if it leads to suffering? If I can force humanity into paradise, isn't that better than allowing them to wallow in misery of their own making?" Wanda's eyes flash scarlet. "Forcing paradise on people is not paradise at all, Tony. You're taking away freedom. Freedom to what? To be weak? To fail? Tony spits the words, and the room seems to tremble with the anger barely contained in his armor's humming energy cores. Look at how easily I ended their pain. You think anyone actually wants to give up what I gave them? No, they'll come around. They always do. A little demonstration is all it takes. Steve's heart sinks. This reasoning cold, utilitarian, cruelist so far from the friend he knew. Tony, if you keep down this path, I will have to stop you, he says quietly, regret heavy in his voice. Iron Man tilts his head pityingly. You can certainly try. With a flick of his wrist, Tony sends a command. In an instant, hard light barriers slam down, separating Steve and Wanda. Steve finds himself boxed in by a translucent energy field, cut off from Wanda, who is likewise trapped across the room. From the walls, turret-like devices emerge and aim at Scarlet Witch. I anticipated you might try some hex nonsense, Tony says coolly, as Wanda hurls a bolt of chaos magic only to see it fizzle harmlessly against an invisible anti-magic field. Did you really think I wouldn't account for your powers? I studied you, Wanda. Your energy signature, your neurological triggers, you're not scrambling anyone's brains today. Wanda grimaces, straining her powers against the suppression tech. Meanwhile, Tony turns to Captain America's enclosure. Steve slams his shield against the barrier containing him with all his might. The vibranium reverberates with a ringing thud, but the prison holds. Tony steps right up to the barrier, face inches from Steve's through the glowing wall. I don't actually want to hurt either of you, he says almost gently. Steve, you're my oldest friend. Believe me, I take no pleasure in this. But I need you to understand, the world is changing, and I'm the one changing it. Don't stand in my way. Steve meets Tony's eyes, his own blue gaze unwavering. This isn't over, Tony. We won't let you go through with this. Iron Man's lips press into a thin line. Stubborn as ever. Fine. He taps a control on his forearm. The energy walls holding Cap and Wanda suddenly electrify and then shove. A kinetic pulse launches both of them backward. Wanda is flung against the glass window with a cry. The force is calibrated not to shatter the glass, but to hurt. Steve is blasted backwards out of the elevator door behind him. Shield raised just in time to absorb most of the impact as he crashes onto the elevator floor. In a blur, the elevator descends of its own accord, effectively ejecting them from Tony's sanctum. Wanda manages to teleport herself in a scarlet flash at the last second to land beside Steve in the elevator before the doors shut. Both of them recover as the lift races downwards. High above, Tony watches their descent through a live feed, a mix of frustration and sadness in his expression. I hoped you'd understand, he murmurs to the empty air. Guess we do this the hard way. Outside Stark Tower, the elevator discharges Captain America and Scarlet Witch onto the street, where protesters gasp in surprise. Steve helps Wanda to her feet. She's shaken but unharmed physically. The crowd surges with questions. Did Iron Man attack them? What now? Steve raises a hand for calm, but his heart is heavy. He failed to reach Tony. Wanda, eyes damp with unshed tears of anger, turns to Steve. He's gone, Steve. That man upstairs, I barely recognize his mind. It's so cold. Steve's shoulder aches from the blast, but he steadies Wanda with a reassuring hand. We'll find another way, he says quietly. Yet even as he says it, thunder rumbles overhead. The storm clouds that Tony watched gathering are directly above now, and fat raindrops begin to patter on the pavement. As Captain America leads Scarlet Witch away from the tower, each lost in their own regrets, a new resolve hardens between them. Tony Stark has declared war on the very principles they swore to uphold. They'll need help, perhaps from unexpected allies, if they're to have any hope of saving Tony from himself. And somewhere not far, a keen pair of eyes watches the departing heroes. In the shadow of an alley, Jean Grey lowers her hood, having witnessed the confrontation from afar. Her heart pounds with dread at what she sensed in Tony's aura high above. It's time to call in another player to this dangerous game, one who knows what it means to lead a divided people. Jean reaches out with her mind across the continent, sending a single urgent thought to the one man who might understand the cost of unchecked power as acutely as Captain America does. Cyclops, we need you. High above San Francisco, in the silence after Captain America's departure, Tony Stark stands alone in the penthouse of Stark Tower West. The rain smears down the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting dancing reflections of the city lights across Tony's armor. He should feel triumphant. He had dispatched his would-be meddlers with ease. But Tony's jaw is clenched, his mind racing. Adrenaline still thrums from the confrontation. A part of him expected Steve to understand, to maybe even join him after seeing the results. But Steve's disappointment, Wanda's fearful eyes, they cling to Tony's thoughts like ghosts. He forces the doubts away. Striding over to a holographic console, Tony brings up a city-wide display. Despite the little stunt Rogers and Maximoff attempted, Extremis metrics are back under control. His drones continue to pacify the most violent protesters outside. On another screen, news reports show pundits debating Iron Man's sudden change. Words like dictator and tyrant scroll across tickers. Tony sneers at them. They'll thank me later, he tells himself. A soft chime sounds, an incoming call. Pepper Potts' name flashes on the holoscreen, accompanied by her concerned photo. Tony hesitates, an old ache swelling in his chest. Pepper, she would try to talk him down, appeal to his better nature. For a moment, Tony's finger hovers over the accept button. He yearns to hear her voice. But the memory of their last conversation, her tearfully asking what happened to the man she loved, and his cold dismissal, still hangs fresh. With a frustrated swipe, Tony silences the call. Not now, he mutters to the empty room. Pepper, you wouldn't understand. Not this time. He paces like a caged lion. Stark Tower's AI, a simplistic system now. Since Jarvis and Friday have been locked out, Tony trusts no one but himself in this state. Reports, global Extremis uplink ready. Yes, the next phase. He had planned to announce an international rollout of Extremis tomorrow. The board is set. With or without the Avengers' blessing, Tony intends to usher in his new world. Lightning flashes outside, and Tony catches his own reflection in the glass. The gleaming white armor, the eyes that seem hollow. For a split second, he almost doesn't recognize himself. He feels alone. But then pride surges. I'm doing what must be done, he affirms silently. They'll realize it eventually. He pushes away the creeping sense of isolation and opens a comm channel to his drone command network. Begin preparations for Project Utopia Exodus, he commands. Dozens of autonomous crafts around the world whir to life, following preset instructions to distribute Extremis beyond San Francisco. If the Avengers won't stand with him, they'll be left behind. Tony won't let anyone, not even his friends, stop mankind's upgrade. As the drones depart into the stormy night, Tony stands with arms crossed, a solitary figure against the panoramic city below. Thunder rolls. The die is cast, he thinks. Let them come if they dare. Iron Man has a world to save, on his terms. Far away on the US East Coast, in the quiet halls of the X-Men's refuge, Scott Summers sits reviewing reports of global unrest. The news out of San Francisco has every leader on edge, and as Cyclops, Scott has a duty to protect mutant kind from whatever comes. When Jean Grey's urgent telepathic call pierces his mind, he's already halfway to suiting up in his classic blue and yellow uniform. In a rush of mental images, Jean shares what she witnessed. Iron Man's confrontation with Captain America, the terrifying coldness behind Tony's actions, the looming chaos in San Francisco. Scott's one remaining eye, the other hidden behind a ruby quartz visor, narrows with determination. Minutes later, a blackbird-like X-Men jet streaks westward, cutting through the clouds at top speed. Cyclops pilots, jaw clenched. Jean sits beside him, silent but focused, amplifying her psychic signal ahead to pinpoint Wanda and Steve's location. Neither speaks much. So much has already been said mind to mind. At last, Scott breaks the silence, voice low and resolute. Tony Stark has become a threat to everyone, human and mutant alike. He recalls Genosha, remembering how those Stark-built Sentinels nearly slaughtered them under the Red Skull's command. Iron Man's genius unchecked has already wrought havoc once. He won't let it happen again. Jean reaches over and touches Scott's gloved hand gently. She feels the turmoil in him. Scott understands all too well the temptation of power without limits. Years of fighting for mutant survival taught him harsh lessons about compromise and control. By the time Cyclops and Jean arrive on the outskirts of San Francisco, dusk is falling. The city's skyline is lit by an uneasy glow. Spotlights from Stark Tower slash through low-hanging storm clouds. They find Steve Rogers and Wanda Maximoff in a makeshift safe house, a discreet apartment borrowed from an old ally of the X-Men. Steve is surprised but grateful to see the two mutants. He clasps Cyclops' hand firmly. Once they stood on opposite sides, Avenger and X-Man at odds, but tonight they share a common purpose. Wanda greets Jean with a wan smile and a hug, relieved to have another powerful ally on the psychic front. In that dimly lit flat, around a dining table covered in maps and schematics, an unlikely quartet forms a plan. There is no arguing over leadership. Experience recognizes experience. Still, some old scars linger unspoken. Wanda's eyes meet Cyclops's across the table. She knows the X-Men have struggled to forgive her for past mistakes that nearly ended mutant kind. In a soft voice, she offers, "Scott, I appreciate you being here. After everything I know, it isn't easy to trust me." Cyclops holds her gaze for a moment, the tension of old grief and anger visible. But he gives a brisk nod. "We're all here to stop Stark. That's what matters now." In that simple exchange, forgiveness isn't granted outright, but a mutual resolve forms. They won't let history repeat another tragedy. Steve outlines Tony's capabilities and the defenses they encountered. He has drones and some kind of energy barriers. He's thought of countermeasures for Wanda's magic, Steve says, voice steady as he relays the earlier encounter. Cyclops listens intently, arms crossed over his chest. Wanda adds, "He's shielded against a frontal assault, and his armor, I've never seen anything like it. It's almost alive." Cyclops nods sharply. "Then we don't give him a single target. We need to hit him on multiple fronts, overwhelm his preparations." He looks to Jean. She already knows her role. "I'll attempt to get into Tony's mind," Jean says, her expression determined. "If I can reach the real Tony inside, even briefly, maybe I can weaken his control or snap him out of this inversion." At the word inversion, Wanda's face tightens with regret, but she quickly focuses. Steve places his finger on a crude sketch of Stark Tower. "Tony's strongest on his home turf. We need to draw him out, away from all his toys." A flash of lightning outside illuminates the room, as if nature itself agrees. Wanda speaks up softly. "I might create a distraction, perhaps something that threatens what he's built, to lure him out." Despite her earlier defeat, she is resolute to try again. They decide on a risky stratagem. Wanda will quietly sneak near Stark's central server hub, located in a data center downtown, and cast a hex to destabilize the Extremis network, just enough to cause malfunctions citywide. It's a dangerous gambit. The chaos could put civilians at risk if their enhancements fail unpredictably again. But Jean offers a solution. She and Wanda together can telepathically broadcast a calming influence to the populace when the hex hits, to prevent panic. Steve and Cyclops, meanwhile, will position themselves openly in front of Stark Tower, making sure Tony's attention stays on them. If we do this, Tony will come out ready for a fight. Steve warns, tightening the straps on his shield. Cyclops meets his gaze through the red visor. We'll be ready. There's mutual respect now. Both leaders understand sacrifice. Cyclops adds grimly, Tony thinks himself above everyone. If we show him something he can't ignore, like two of his friends standing defiant in the open, he'll take the bait. They move out into the night. The city streets are eerily quiet as the clock nears midnight, save for distant sirens and the hum of Stark's ever-watchful drones. The four split into two teams as planned. On a quiet side street, Scarlet Witch and Jean Grey make their way towards Stark's primary data hub, a squat, fortified building where the servers controlling Extremis citywide are housed. The door is secured with high-tech locks, but Wanda's fingers trace a quick sigil in the air and the electronic bolts click open obediently. Inside, the server room hums with blue light. Towering racks of processors blink, orchestrating Tony's grand design. Wanda feels a chill as she realizes how deeply Tony has woven himself into the city. "This is it," she whispers. Jean places a hand on Wanda's shoulder, telepathically lending moral support. Wanda's crimson energy swirls around her hands as she begins a delicate incantation. She closes her eyes, focusing on weakening the Extremis network, not destroying it entirely, that could be catastrophic, but introducing chaos into Tony's order. With each phrase of Latin softly uttered, servers flicker and spark. Jean extends her mind across San Francisco, touching the edges of thousands of minds influenced by Extremis. With gentle psychic nudges, she instills calm and reassurance, hoping to buffer any panic once Wanda's hex takes effect. As Wanda completes the final syllable, a pulse of red magic seeps into the machinery. Monitors glitch and error alarms silently flare. Throughout the city, Extremis-infused citizens feel a strange wavering in their artificially induced euphoria, a moment of dizziness, a sudden clarity cutting through the haze. The digital billboards that blanketed buildings with Tony's symbol experience a brief distortion, the giant face of Iron Man snarling into static before the image stabilizes again. It's subtle, but it's enough. Wanda exhales, her spell done. She glances at Jean, who gives a reassuring nod. So far, so good. They slip back out into the night, unseen, as pandemonium quietly seeds itself in Tony's systems. Meanwhile, Steve and Cyclops march boldly down the main boulevard towards Stark Tower. As Cyclops walks beside Captain America, he allows himself a rare moment of candor. "Steve," he says, not taking his eyes off the looming tower ahead, "if it comes down to it, you realize Tony might not surrender." Steve's face is grave in the flicker of streetlights. "I know," he replies quietly. "We'll save him if we can. If not," he doesn't finish the thought. He doesn't have to. Cyclops understands. Sometimes leaders have to make impossible choices. He once had to do the same with someone he loved dearly when she was consumed by the power of the Phoenix. He prays tonight won't demand such a sacrifice. Rain begins to pour in earnest, drenching the two as they reach the plaza before Stark Tower. Water streams off the brim of Steve's helmet, drips down Cyclops' visor. They stand there, side by side in the downpour, two silhouettes of defiance against the neon Stark logo glowering above. High up in the tower, Tony Stark does notice. His sensors flag anomalies across the city network, a hex-induced glitch spreading like wildfire. Simultaneously, his security cameras show Captain America and Cyclops brazenly out in the open, staring up at his stronghold. Tony's eyes narrow at the dual affront. So, they want to challenge him and sabotage his city? Fine, he'll answer both. With a thought-controlled command, Iron Man summons his armor, now fully integrated into his very body via Extremis. Liquid metal flows over Tony's form, encasing him in that luminous shell of power. The tower's rooftop iris opens, and with a roar of repulsors, Iron Man launches into the stormy sky. Below, Steve and Scott see the burst of blue-white light ascending. Cyclops can feel the hairs on his neck rise as thunder rolls. "Showtime," he mutters. Steve raises his star-spangled shield, resolve hard as iron. The final battle is about to begin, a showdown of ideals under torrents of rain. Lightning cracks. Iron Man hurtles down from the clouds like an avenging deity, landing before the two heroes with a splash of water and jet fire. In the eerie glow of street lamps and his own reactor light, Tony's armor gleams, water cascading off it. He looks from Captain America to Cyclops, expression unreadable behind his faceplate. "You just couldn't let it go," Iron Man says, voice amplified and echoing in the empty plaza. "I offered a better world, and you want to tear it down." Steve steps forward. "Tony, it's over. Stand down. We don't want to fight you." Rain drips from his chin. His stance is unwavering. Beside him, Cyclops plants his feet, visor beginning to glow as he readies his optic blast. "Last chance, Stark," Scott calls out. There is sorrow in his voice, too. He doesn't want to hurt an ally, but he will, if he must. Iron Man slowly shakes his head. "You're a fool, Rogers, both of you." "So be it." His gauntlets crackle to life with energy. Far off, on another street, Scarlet Witch whispers an incantation with Jean Grey's psychic voice echoing alongside it. The final act is set. The storm witnesses the moment as the Avengers and X-Men stand united against the fallen genius. In that breath of silence before chaos erupts, time itself seems to hold its breath. This is it. The tipping point between salvation and domination, between the soul of Tony Stark and the monster he has become. And once that breath passes, all heaven breaks loose in a clash worthy of legends. Iron Man strikes first. Twin beams of searing energy lance out from Tony's palms toward Captain America and Cyclops. Steve raises his shield just in time. The blast slams him backward, feet skidding on rain, slick pavement. Cyclops dives aside with agile reflexes honed in the danger room, rolling and coming up on one knee. His visor shines bright and he returns fire, releasing a ruby-red optic blast that spears through the night. The concussive force catches Iron Man in the chest, actually staggering Tony a step, a sign that even in his godlike state, he can be hurt. Lightning flashes as the battle erupts in earnest. Iron Man's boot thrusters flare, propelling him forward with a burst of speed. He aims a gauntlet at Cyclops, unleashing micro-missiles that streak through the rain, each leaving a trail of vapor. Scott Summers crosses his arms over his face as a half-dozen explosions blossom around him, knocking him off his feet. Captain America leaps, shield first, to intercept Tony's charge. Vibranium meets titanium alloy with a resounding clang that echoes down the deserted street. For a moment, Steve holds the line, shield pressed against Iron Man's arm cannons in a contest of strength. "You can't win, Tony." Steve grunts through clenched teeth, pushing with all his might. Iron Man's faceplate is inches from Steve's determined stare. Through the soaking rain, Tony's distorted voice growls, "I already have." With a surge of mechanized power, he swats Captain America aside like an insect. Steve tumbles across the pavement, crashing through a newsstand in a shower of splintered wood and paper. Cyclops, bruised but unbroken, uses the opening. He adjusts the dial on his visor to maximum. "Tony, heads up!" Scott shouts, and then unleashes an optic blast of unprecedented intensity. The red beam, wider than a car, booms forth. Iron Man turns at the last second. The blast catches him full on, driving him backward through the air. Tony braces, digging his heels into the asphalt, armor sizzling where Scott's energy burns against it. For a moment, Iron Man vanishes behind a brilliant red torrent. Cyclops pours in everything he has, rain turning to steam around him from the heat of his own power. "Enough!" Tony snarls. With a titanic effort, he amplifies his suit's shields, dispersing the optic beam in a shower of light. An instant later, A pinpoint laser fires from Iron Man's gauntlet, grazing Cyclops' visor. The ruby quartz lens shatters with a crack. Scott cries out, clapping his hands over his eyes to contain the uncontrolled blasts that will shoot out if he opens them. Half-blind and vulnerable, Cyclops stumbles, red light leaking between his fingers. Before Iron Man can press the advantage, scarlet chaos, magic coils around his arms like glowing ropes. Wanda has arrived on the scene, eyes blazing as she focuses her power. At the same time, Jean Grey's voice echoes telepathically in Tony's mind. "Tony, listen to me." The dual assault, mystical and mental, catches Tony off guard. Scarlet Witch steps from around a street corner, hands weaving a complex shape in the air. "By the mark of Set, be undone," she cries, sending a hex bolt straight at Tony. The spell hits his armor, making the glowing circuits along its surface flicker erratically. Inside that high-tech shell, Tony feels a sudden tug at his psyche, Wanda's magic trying to unravel the dark inversion that twists his heart. Iron Man roars in defiance. A pulse of repulsor energy bursts out from him in all directions, like a bomb of light. It hurls Wanda backward, and even disrupts Jean's telepathic link for a second. Jean, who had been concealed telepathically until now, steps out of the shadows near Wanda, her red hair plastered to her face by the rain. She concentrates, her eyes closed as she extends a hand towards Tony, pushing past the static in her mind. "Tony, you don't want to do this." Her mental voice calls out to him, gentle yet firm, echoing through the corridors of his mind. Inside Iron Man's helmet, Tony's confident smirk falters. For an instant, his surroundings blur. He's not on a rainy street. Suddenly, he's inside his own mind, a landscape of memories and emotions. Jean's psychic presence appears before him in this mental space as a calm, glowing figure. Around them swirl fleeting images. Tony at a press conference announcing the Extremis app with a grandiose grin. Tony earlier in his career, building the first Iron Man suit in a cave, eyes full of desperation and hope. Tony clinking glasses with Steve in happier days. "Get out of my head," Tony snarls, both in reality and on the mental plane. In the physical world, Iron Man staggers, bringing his hands up to his helmet as if in pain. Sensing weakness, Captain America recovers and charges back into the fray, slamming his shield against Tony's knee joint. Metal dents. Tony buckles briefly. Jean pushes deeper, walking through Tony's psyche. She finds a dark throne room at the center of his mind where a twisted version of Tony Stark sits in armor of shadows, the embodiment of his inverted ego. It glares at Jean with eyes of ice. "He's mine," it hisses. All around her, Jean feels the weight of Tony's genius corrupted. Towering achievements turned to monuments of ego, empathy chained and gagged in a corner. Behind the dark, armored figure, she glimpses something else, a faint light, the true Tony Stark, buried but not extinguished. Gathering all her courage, Jean reaches out mentally toward that light. It's weak, flickering, but it's Tony's genuine spirit, the man who cares, who feels guilt and love and friendship. The dark apparition lunges at Jean with a psychic blade, screaming in rage. Jean braces herself and calls out in the mental space, "Tony, fight it! This isn't you!" Outside, the battle rages. Iron Man thrashes in the air, torn between blasting the heroes and clutching at his head in torment. Scarlet Witch seizes the moment to try her ultimate move. Crawling to her knees, soaked and shivering, Wanda extends one hand and begins chanting the spell of inversion, the same incantation that started this nightmare, now meticulously altered for a reverse effect focused only on Tony. Her free hand draws a sigil in the air with glowing red energy. Cyclops, still unable to open his eyes without his visor, hears Wanda's chanting and Jean's mental cries, and knows this is the critical moment. Though half-blind, he refuses to be helpless. From behind his closed eyelids, he emits a wide beam, sweeping it toward Iron Man's feet. The blast cracks the ground and forces Tony to lift off or be hit. It's not an aimed shot, but it corrals Tony like a herding flare, keeping him within Wanda's spell radius. Captain America, battered and bleeding, also rises one more time. He throws himself at Iron Man with shield leading. Tony fires a repulsor blast in reflex, finally connecting squarely. The energy plows into Steve's shield at point-blank range. With an ear-splitting crack, the vibranium disc, symbol of an unbreakable resolve, fractures. The force sends Steve flying back, the pieces of his iconic shield scattering across the concrete. Steve hits the ground hard and does not immediately get up. Time seems to slow as Tony Stark hovers over the broken shield and the fallen friend who once wielded it. He extends a trembling gauntlet towards Steve, the repulsor glowing, ready to deliver a final, lethal blast. This is the moment glimpsed at the story's beginning. A hero fallen, an inverted god poised to strike down hope itself. "Tony, please," Steve wheezes through the pain, looking up into the cold mask of Iron Man. There is fear in Captain America's eyes, not for himself but for his friend's soul. Jean Grey, still locked in psychic battle within Tony's mind, screams out as the dark Tony pins her mental form to the ground. Desperate, she flings a surge of her own memories at him. Memories of love, sacrifice, of the X-Men fighting for those who feared and hated them, of Tony's own past self, handing a crying child a teddy bear amid wreckage in some long-ago battle he helped resolve. The barrage of empathy hits the dark apparition like a flood. It recoils, loosening its grip on Tony's core spirit. Wanda's voice rises to a crescendo, her heart pounding with desperate resolve. This was the very spell that had cursed Tony, now meticulously reshaped to save him. Fear laces every utterance, but Wanda pours all her guilt and hope into each word. The scarlet sigil she's drawn flares bright around the armored villain. "By the light of redemption," she cries, "invert thy soul and be free." She slams her palm down, releasing the spell. A column of red light engulfs Iron Man. Tony's body stiffens as chaos, magic surges through him. Inside his mind, Jean sees the dark armored figure howl as cracks of white light spiderweb across its form. With one final mental push, Jean reaches the true Tony, a hand grasping through the darkness. Outside, a blinding blast of red and white energy explodes from Iron Man's form, the very same blinding flash that left us wondering at the beginning of this tale. The force knocks everyone nearby off their feet. Wanda collapses, spent. Cyclops is thrown back against a lamppost, hands still over his eyes. Rain churns to mist in the searing blast radius. When the light fades, Iron Man is down on one knee in the center of a smoking crater of melted asphalt. His armor's glow has dimmed to a faint flicker. Steam rises off the shattered pieces of Captain America's shield at his feet. For a heart-stopping moment, nobody moves. Jean Grey carefully opens her eyes. In the psychic plane, she felt the darkness shatter. But is Tony truly free? She reaches out with her mind gently. What she senses makes her break into a relieved sob. Not the icy void of a tyrant's mind, but the familiar warmth of a troubled human consciousness. Tony Stark lifts his head. His faceplate retracts with a weary hiss, revealing his face beneath. Tony's eyes are no longer cold and contemptuous. They are wide, wet with tears and horror. He looks around at the devastation, at Steve's motionless form a few yards away, at Wanda and the others lying battered in the rain. What have I done?" His voice cracks. The slick, confident veneer is gone, replaced by confusion and dawning remorse. Captain America groans and stirs, drawing Tony's gaze. Steve is alive, but the sight of his broken shield pieces around him draws a sob from Tony's throat. He remembers everything, every terrible thing. The realization of it is a weight that nearly drives him back to his knees. Tony stumbles over to Steve and, with shaking hands, helps his friend sit up. "Steve! Steve! Are you?" Tony can barely form the words. Steve Rogers looks into Tony's unmasked face. There, he sees his friend, truly his friend, for the first time since that fateful day on Genosha. Bruised and exhausted, Steve manages a faint smile of relief. "Tony, you're back." At that, Tony turns away in shame. "Back," he echoes bitterly, looking at his hands as if they belong to a stranger. The white armor is cracked, stained with soot and rain. I almost killed you." The truth of it hits him like a dagger. Just minutes ago, he was ready to execute Steve without mercy. Behind them, Cyclops has found an intact spare visor from his belt pouch and clicks it into place, restoring control of his powers. Wanda limps over to Captain America and Tony, joining Jean, who is already by Steve's side checking his wounds. The small band of heroes gathers around the broken man in the armor. There is a long silence but for the falling rain. Tony's head hangs as memories of his actions in San Francisco against his friends swirl in his mind. Finally, it is Cyclops who breaks the silence, his tone harsh but not without empathy. "The city, all those people under Extremis, we need to set things right, Stark." Tony flinches at the mention. Setting things right? How? How can he possibly atone for what he's done? "I'll fix it," he whispers, voice raw. "I can shut Extremis down. I have a kill switch. Code 4515. It'll be over." He had built back doors even in his hubris, it seems. Jean rests a hand on Tony's armored shoulder. "We'll help you," she says softly. Wanda, still pale from exertion, nods. "Together," she adds, offering a small forgiving smile. Tony cannot meet their eyes. He stands, agony evident in every movement. With a few spoken commands, he remotely disables every last Extremis node in the city. On the skyline, the glowing digital billboards that bore his face flicker off, one by one. The nightmare is ending. Sirens wail in the distance, authorities finally responding to the violent energy signatures downtown. Likely, SHIELD or local enforcement will be here within minutes. Tony knows what that means. He turns to Steve, who is being helped to his feet by Cyclops. Stark's voice trembles. "Steve, after all this, I won't fight whatever justice I have coming. I promise." Captain America picks up a broken fragment of his shield, turning it in his hand. His eyes reflect the cracked metal as if seeing the shattered trust between them. He steps closer to Tony, and for a moment Tony braces, expecting anger or even a strike. But instead, Steve simply places a hand on Tony's shoulder, just for a second, and squeezes. "We stopped you, Tony. That's what matters right now," Steve says quietly. There is pain in his voice, and sadness for his friend. "The rest, we'll figure it out." Blue and red lights from approaching vehicles dance on the wet streets. Tony can see uniformed figures cautiously surrounding the area. They see the Avengers emblem on Cap's uniform, the X on Cyclops, and stand down slightly. Cyclops, ever pragmatic, glances to Jean and Wanda. "We should get out of the rain. And you," he nods to Tony, "you're going to need medical attention and, well, a good lawyer." His attempt at levity falls flat, but breaks some of the tension. Tony almost laughs, a short, hollow sound. "Right." He looks around at these people who came together to save him from himself. The cost of his power nearly came due in their blood. He feels an urge to say so much. Apologies, gratitude, self-loathing. But all that comes out is a choked whisper, "I'm sorry for everything." Jean senses the sincerity and also the turmoil ahead. She knows the road to redemption will be long and hard for Tony Stark. "The important thing is you're here, and you again," she assures gently. Wanda, still leaning on a lamppost for support, musters a smile. We'll need the old Tony in the days to come, that's for sure. As the police and emergency crews begin to fan out, Cyclops signals that it's time to leave. The X-Men will slip away quietly. No need to complicate matters with their presence. Wanda, too, prefers not to be there when questions are asked. She's had enough of those for one lifetime. Steve will stay by Tony's side as long as it takes. That much is clear. Before parting, Cyclops turns to Tony one last time. Rain has begun to lighten into a drizzle. "Stark, remember this moment," Scott says, stern but not unkind. "Remember that no matter how brilliant you are, you're still human. We all are." His lone visible eye behind the visor meets Tony's gaze. Scott Summers has had his own dances with absolute power, and he wants Tony to heed the lesson. Tony nods slowly. "I will." He swallows hard, and for the first time in a long while, he means it without reservation. Jean gives Tony an encouraging nod, and then moves to follow Cyclops into the shadows. Wanda gently touches Tony's arm, a quiet gesture of forgiveness, before she and Jean depart together, a witch and a telepath fading into the dark, rain-soaked cityscape. Now it's just Tony and Steve standing amid the aftermath as agents carefully approach. Tony raises his hands in surrender, the heavy armor plating peeling back to reveal the gaunt, exhausted man underneath. Steve speaks softly, meant for Tony's ears alone. "We'll get through this. You're not alone, pal." Tony's eyes brim again and he bows his head in humble acknowledgement. As they walk forward to meet the authorities, the storm finally begins to break. The clouds above slowly part, revealing a faint sliver of dawn light on the horizon. San Francisco will wake up to a new day, free from Iron Man's imposed vision, yet carrying the scars of this long night. 1 week later, Tony finds himself watching a late-night news panel from the austere comfort of a S.H.I.E.L.D. safehouse. On screen, pundits argue heatedly. One insists that despite Stark's overreach, his Extremis program eliminated crime and disease in San Francisco for a time, a result governments had failed to achieve. Another angrily retorts that no end justifies enslaving free will. Tony's stomach churns. It's like listening to the angel and devil on his own shoulders. A part of him, the part that felt so sure as the superior Iron Man, wants to shout that the first pundit is right, that he did what had to be done. But the real Tony, the man who is struggling to atone, feels only sickened and ashamed. With a trembling hand, he switches off the television, plunging the room into silence. The question of godhood versus humanity echoes in that silence. Tony now understands intimately that to uplift the world by crushing its spirit is a cure worse than any disease. As for Tony Stark, he faces a long road of accountability and soul-searching. He cooperates fully with the authorities, helping dismantle the remnants of his Extremis project, spending sleepless nights ensuring every last trace of its influence is purged safely. Legal consequences loom, but perhaps the world's need for Iron Man's heroism, the true heroism, will guide the final judgment. Through it all, Tony carries the weight of what he almost became. Late one evening, weeks later, Tony stands on the balcony of the rebuilt Avengers Tower in New York, looking out at the city lights. A prototype of a new shield gleams on a workbench inside, his gift to Steve, once finished, to atone for the one he broke. Tony stares at his trembling hands. "I've been playing human," he murmurs, recalling with a shudder the twisted mantra he lived by in his inverted state. He used to believe he was a god playing human. Now he knows the truth in his bones. He is human, painfully so, and that is not a weakness but a precious tether. Behind him, the balcony door opens and Steve Rogers steps out quietly, joined by Jean Grey, who's visiting to check on Tony's mental well-being as a friend. Tony turns to them with a tentative smile. He is haunted, yes, but not defeated. He's alive, free of the inversion, and surrounded by those who still care. For a moment, the three friends stand quietly, watching the city lights. Tony breaks the silence first, voice low. I really messed up, didn't I? There's no flippancy in his tone, only raw remorse. Steve exchanges a glance with Jean and steps closer. You did, Steve answers honestly, placing a hand on Tony's shoulder. But you also helped fix it. That counts for something. You're still here, Tony. That means everything. Tony bows his head, the old swagger nowhere to be found. Sometimes I wonder if I should ever put on that armor again, he confesses. The idea that he could betray himself and his friends so completely clearly weighs on him. Jean Grey moves to Tony's other side, her presence warm and understanding. The fact that you care about what you did that you regret, it means there's more of the hero in you than you realize, Jean says softly. We all have darkness inside us. You fought yours and won back yourself. Don't forget that. Steve nods firmly. We're with you, Tony. Always. We'll face whatever comes next together, as we always have. At that, Tony finally meets their eyes. The gratitude in his face is mingled with lingering sorrow. But something new glints there too. Hope. If he can earn back the trust of these friends, perhaps he can forgive himself in time. He turns back toward the horizon, letting out a long breath he didn't realize he was holding. Together, Steve, Jean, and Tony stand and watch dawn approach. A team united not by perfection, but by understanding. The camera of our mind's eye pulls back on this final scene. Tony Stark, a man who gazed into the abyss of godhood and pulled himself back to humanity with the help of his friends, stands humbled yet determined. The night sky over New York is clear, dotted with stars. In Tony's eyes, there is pain, but also the flicker of hope that he can rebuild what was broken, in the city, in his friendships, and within himself. Thus ends this epic of inverted morality and hard-won redemption. Iron Man was broken and reforged, learning in the most brutal way that the cost of power can never be repaid by power alone. It requires the strength of character, the bonds of trust, and the willingness to remain human, no matter how tempting the mantle of a god may be. Tony Stark carries that lesson with him like a scar on his soul, vowing never to lose himself to hubris again. Whatever comes next, he will face it not as a would-be god, but as a man, flawed, striving, and ultimately human.